So the question, or at least one of the questions that we have to begin to ask ourselves as we're exploring this question of God being the greatest and the most vital thing in our life, is how do we view people? So if we believe that we need to love God with our whole heart, soul, and mind, how then do we love people in the same way? I think one of the problems is, especially in high school and in middle school, is that we have a tendency to view people as different categories. Like we see people as poor people, we see people as rich people, we see people as rebels, we see people as religious, we see people as atheists, we see people as liberal, we see people as conservative, on and on and on. We see people in different categories, in different cliques, in different realms of life, and it's hard for us to get them out of that. We typically also will hang out with people that are in the same category as us. So if we play sports, we hang out with people who play in sports. If we are involved in theater, we hang out with people that are involved in theater. If we are involved in the church, we will hang out with people involved in the church. We like to hang out with people who are the same as us. The problem is, frankly, the Bible. The problem is that Jesus never went after people that were just like him. In fact, he went after people that were significantly different than him. He loved and cared for those who were the least of society, that were on the fringes of society, people that were different than his skin color, people that were different than his socioeconomic status, people that were different than his lifestyle. So the question is, how do we love people like God loves people? How do we care for people that like God cares for people? And there's a specific story in the book of John in which we see Jesus care for someone outside of his category, care for someone that was outside of his sphere, outside of his realm, to the point where it makes the people that followed him, that makes the disciples question what he is doing. And it is in John chapter 4. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open them up to John chapter 4. We see a story in which I'm going to take different clips out of the story to be able to share with you. But you can read the story in your houses together as we go along. So here's what happens. Jesus is traveling, and he's traveling through a specific place called Samaria. And Samaria was an enemy of Israel in the way that Israel looked down upon Samaritans because of a terrible history that they had with them. And they would look on people that had a different status as them, different skin color as them, and they would look down upon them. So Israelites, especially a great teacher such as Jesus, would never associate with Samaritans. So Jesus decides, I'm going to go straight through the city of Samaria and associate with these people. And at this moment, the disciples begin to kind of question what he's doing and why he's deciding to go into the city of Samaria. But he decides to do it instead. And so Jesus goes, and in John 4:7, we see Jesus interacting with a woman of Samaria. It says this: a woman from Samaria came to draw water. And Jesus says to her, give me a drink. And it says in verse 8, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So Jesus is feeling this racial tension, this economic tension that is occurring right now in the text. Jesus is associating with a person that he would not normally associate with, or culturally would not be considered able to associate with. In verse 16, Jesus says to her, go call your husband. And come here. Go tell him to come here. And in verse 17, the woman answered him, I have no husband. And then Jesus says to her, you are right in saying, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true. So then in verse 27, what we see is that Jesus ends up having the disciples come back, and they begin to question the fact that he's even talking with a woman. And so here's what we see. We see Jesus, number one, in a surprising place. He is in a place that culturally he was not supposed to be in. He is in a place in which culturally would be looked down upon and frowned upon. No Israelite, especially a teacher, would go there. Number two, he's talking to a surprising person. A rabbi to be talking to a woman, a man talking to a woman in this time. those two things was very strange and very weird during this time period. He is not supposed to be doing it. It's to the point where his disciples are questioning why he's doing it. On top of that, it is a woman that during this time had husband after husband. She was traveling around to a partner over and over and over again. And a rabbi at this time would not typically associate with a woman that would be considered quote unquote sinful. But Jesus is. In fact, Jesus decided to go to a woman, a Samaritan, a sinner, and be one of the first people that he tells that he is the Messiah, the chosen one to come to earth. He is delivering this very important message to someone that he is not supposed to be giving this message to according to the culture at the time. Before Jesus had declared it to anyone else, he told it to a woman who he was and who he meant to the world. Someone that he is not supposed to be sharing it to, but he does. And so we see Jesus do three different things. Number one, he moves towards her. Number two, he talks to her. And number three, he believed that the saving work of the gospel would be able to be active and present in her life. He doesn't just look at her category. He talks to her as a person. Another way to put it is that he moved out of his category into a conversation. And that's what Jesus calls us. That's what God calls us to do in our own lives. He calls us, and this is the main idea for this week, that we need to move people out of categories and into conversations. He calls us to move out of our categories, out of the preconceived notions that we have, out of the stigmas, out of the problems that we have, and go talk to people, to share conversations, to get to know them, to begin to share life with them, and then to share the good news of who he is into their lives. So students, as you're going back this week, I want you to get out of the different segments and categories that you are in. I want you to go and I want you to share your life and the love of Christ to other people that are different than you.